Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Who goes first?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. With me, as always, is the incomparable Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say something.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Okay, that's enough. Today, we actually are very excited for this show because yesterday we took a road trip to Jupiter and Palm Beach County, and we had actually a very busy, exciting day. We were there for about 12, 13 hours, and I thought today we will talk about some of the things that we experienced in all of our visits. And I think part of it for me, Jennifer, is this idea that everybody sees the world through their own goggles, as they say. And I think that in a lot of ways, when you're in the real estate industry for a very long time, you can't help but have real estate goggles on all the time. And so the way we experience going through a shopping center or an office building, visiting our doctor's office, taking our families out to dinner, we always are looking at the entire ecosystem that we interact with, especially in commercial real estate, through those eyes. And I think it definitely is the case from our trip yesterday.
I would agree. And I was thinking about it when we were talking about doing kind of our roadshow trip as an episode. I was thinking for us, this episode is going to be, because even though we said that we focus mostly on Miami and South Florida, this is still considered South Florida by a lot of people. Jupiter is a part of our Realtor Association at the Miami Association of Realtors. And when we discussed doing this, I was thinking, yeah, we can do this because it's very much like going on vacation and coming back with a trinket or something. We're just coming back with real estate trinkets, which is knowledge of what we learned and saw up in a totally different market and what would be worth bringing back or comparing to, the Miami market.
So we started the trip up in Juno Beach. We have a client who just acquired 124,000 square foot shopping center that is anchored by supermarket Publix. Spent some time up there and get to experience the center. I think we both came to the conclusion that the center was very well curated.
Correct.
And still allowing for a lot of opportunity for upside.
Correct. It was interesting because it was on a hard corner right across from beach access, public beach access. They had two out parcels, one which they owned and one which they didn't own, both of which were vacant and previous bank branches with great drive-throughs. So we looked at the potential of those. We got a little history on the parcel that they do not own. Very interesting, too, because that market up there is definitely a seasonal market. Like we used to say that Miami was seasonal. Miami, I don't think is that seasonal anymore. But up there, it was very apparent that it was. So there were a couple of things that right off the bat stood out, which is if you look at the demographics for that area, it is an older, wealthier demographic. So a lot of snowbirds, but if you looked at the mix in the center, it wasn't really, right? So you had Publix and Walgreens were the main national tenants. Everything else was small mom and pop. So the clothing store was definitely aimed at the older demographic. But then there was a kava bar, which we'll talk about that because I'd never heard of Kava Bar before. And there were several in a lot of the centers that we visited up there. But then there was also like the barefoot yoga, which again, I mentioned, I thought yoga, the only way to do yoga was barefoot, but there was a barefoot yoga place. There was a coffee shop. So there was a 2J's, which we also have down here in South Florida and Coral Springs. So the mix was kind of a mix too. And then what we found, what we realized later is, well, in the summer you get the young demographic, which is the high schoolers and the college kids that are going to the beach, right? So thought it was very, very well curated. They had some great local restaurants there that apparently attract a lot of people in the evening and during the weekends, especially during season, but even in off season, they do a lot to cater to the younger demographic that they have. There was a wine bar there that was super, super cool that is only open from 5 to 10. So again, they were knowing their market. So I thought that was really interesting. And then they had a ton of outdoor space, which if you're anywhere in the pretty much world right now other than London, it's really, really hot. Yeah. But there was a lot of outdoor eating space, and most of the people that were there wanted additional space. There was one restaurant in particular where they were trying to find more outdoor eating. So great trend to still be moving forward. But those were some of the takeaways. And then we saw in the back they had that really cool warehouse, and they had to enclose the loading dock and service area for the publics because that back of service part of the center backs up directly to residential.
Right. Which I'm sure, as I mentioned, the truck drivers really appreciate the fact that they get a little reprieve from the sun or from the rain, which we have plenty of here in South Florida. What I really found interesting is our clients are very methodical in their approach, and they like to study every angle. He's using Placer AI to really understand how there is a shift from a center that is mostly seasonal to a center where there is a lot of activity by the locals that are visiting the center. And this dynamic of having an older crowd early in the day, but a younger crowd, late in the afternoon, I thought that was really interesting that, he's looking at data to drive decisions, which I think is very important when you're running, when you're trying to curate roughly 125,000 square feet of space, especially when you have a large out parcel that is not what it was, which was a bank, 4,500 square feet, but you have space for a drive-through. There's, there's definitely I think an F&B future.
Right. And they agreed, right? They thought they were thinking the same thing. And for the out parcel that they do own, that wasn't on the hard corner, but was across the street from the parking from the beach. They were thinking of splitting that space up, doing a drive-through Starbucks and then on the other side doing a tiki bar, right? For the people who want to come in. For those of you who haven't been to Miami beaches, we have amazing beaches, beautiful, gorgeous beaches. But they're hot. We don't have many trees. Most of our beaches don't have trees. So it's all pretty much, if you need shade, you're going to, bring your own umbrella and build it, or you're going to go to your nearest shopping center when you start melting to cool off and grab a drink.
Our clients invest all throughout South Florida. They really like Miami. They looked up and down. They were wanting to execute this 1031 exchange. You start looking at, could they have bought something like this in Miami or in Fort Lauderdale, closer to Miami. And when we looked at it, it's not only the dynamics of the financials of the deal, but it's also the lack of available options, right, in the marketplace.
The size, and just nothing has traded. Nothing of that size has, or very little has traded.
And when you do a 1031 exchange, you have a certain additional set of criteria that you have to meet that has to do with the timing of executing that 1031 exchange and the opportunities that are available. So I thought it was really, really interesting. I also enjoy that they had a pulse into the area, and I agree with you, having those, warehouse bays in the back of the shopping center, which, it's a complete surprise. You have to drive to the back to actually realize that they're there, and the amount of demand. He's telling me, I wish I had more, because I have a long list of people and a waiting list to.
Right, and it's not even just the shopping center. He said some of their tenants in the shopping center center are paying a premium for that space, but people that just want the warehouse space near that area. So I'm thinking, if you have any kind of boating type of business that you do out of the beach, right? Like a paddleboard business or something. What a great, you're literally across the beach, right? Across the street from the beach. So I thought that was cool. The other thing that actually is coming to mind now that I think is very interesting about this group is, one of the chats on, hashtag retweet on Twitter had the question, if you specialize in an asset class, do you invest in other asset classes? And my answer was yes, I invest in asset classes that I don't particularly know about, but I do it as an LP. And in this case, this isn't how this family made their money. They made their money in a whole different industry. Yet when they took the money from the sale of their previous business, they blanketed the real estate sector. So they bought in Miami, they bought a warehouse, right? You represented them on the warehouse. They bought the shopping center. They bought 2 office buildings up north. They bought a cattle ranch, right? So talk about diversifying and not just sticking to one asset class. So I think, it would be interesting to do an interview or further discussion with them as to why or how they approached it and everything else, because it's not a big operation. It's a family business.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about them as we come along. And then we got a chance to visit with our friend David Abernathy with Waterfront Properties up in Jupiter. He's so bright and smart, and he certainly is always looking for ways to think outside the box and to answer important questions. And aside from the fact that we had a great lunch, I thought it was really interesting always thinking about the questions that we get asked most often. And so he says, so if you really think about it, the question that you get asked the most is, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. And if you're a real estate agent, the second question that follows up is, how's the market? And then we started to break down exactly what people actually mean by that, and especially when they're asking questions that are related to timing the market.
And we've done a couple of episodes on that I think apply to that, right, which were the qualifying questions episode and the buy low episode. Like, what does that mean? And that goes to the timing the market. And I thought it was super interesting because you and I often talk about this, and just Dave is a residential agent, but his mind works like a commercial broker, right? Because he's all about the numbers. He's wicked smart on the residential numbers. He knows them inside out, top down, knows how to get them fast, knows how to synthesize them in very quick, easy to use graphics. So, from the residential standpoint, he's great, but we always talk to him because, a lot of it's universal, and because his brain is so numbers oriented, we're like, okay, he's really a commercial broker, so we can take a lot away. But one of the things he said is and he's speaking about his agents and when he's training them, again, on the residential side, it's when they're asked, well, how's the market? He asks them, well, how do you answer? And you're like, well, it's great. It's a great time to buy. I know the interest rates are high, but they're only going to go higher. And he goes, okay, well, that's about you. And it's always about you. And you and I always talk about how whatever we do has to bring value to the customer, right? Yeah. So he says, the real answer is like, well, why are you buying? When you do your qualifying questions, then when people ask you, well, is it the right time to buy? Well, it always depends on, is it the right time to buy for the person asking the question? Yeah. Not regardless of what the market's doing. And he used that as an example. He's like, look, during COVID, a lot of people moved here because they were all alone up north. They wanted to be with their family. Their family decided they didn't want to be in an apartment in New York. They rented an Airbnb down here. They fell in love with it. They bought a little place. And so for the family that was left behind, the answer was yes, now is the right time to buy because it's the right time for you. And whether the market goes up or down a little bit over the next couple of years, or regardless of what interest rates are doing, for you, it's the right time to buy. And I think that's what we're seeing in the market overall. And the same thing could be said, and we talked about this with the buy low, about how sometimes the timing was just right for, like with my investments, to get into the market, even though we bought at the height, kind of at the market. But if we hadn't done that, we never would have gotten into the market, right? Because when everything's bad and everything's crashing, you're not getting a loan like right now, right? Credit is tight. So if you waited to buy and you wanted to get in, and now is the time that you're trying to get in, but nobody's lending, then so anyway, he's fascinated.
I thought that was really interesting because he was saying, well, I asked an agent if it was a good time to buy 2 years ago, was it a good time to buy today? And the answer is always the same. Yes, it is a good time to buy. And he was saying the most important item in that equation is the individual that you're serving. It might not be the right time to buy for one person for the other, and it has less to do with the market conditions and more to do with the needs of the individual that is making that decision. So I thought that was really smart. I also thought it was really smart, like, he shared the story about an agent that had a 92% success rate when he went to a listing presentation, to get the listing. And so the agent thinks, well, if I go from 92% to 95%, then that should be my goal. And so he goes to Dave and says, Dave, I want you to help me do this. So Dave does a complete study, and he goes, how often do you have an opportunity to be in front of people to make that presentation? So Dave says, well, look, if you increase the amount of at-bats, right, the amount of opportunities, if I am successful in getting you from 92 to 95%, you might have 1 or 2 extra deals a year, right? But if I increase that same percentage of the opportunities that you have to actually make a presentation, you have a 92% success rate, it's going to work out. Now you're going to have 6 to 12 extra deals a year, and so that I always appreciate that aspect of Dave, which is hyper analyzing the statistics to get to really what is going to move the needle. And sometimes, we don't do that enough in the industry. When I was a teacher, we would always analyze the results of the test. And then you have to assign responsibility. Sometimes it's, do I have to throw the test out because the majority of people didn't learn what they were supposed to learn? So now it's really my fault as a teacher, right? It's as much an assessment on the students as it is on the teacher. Right. And so I feel that is a perspective that is applicable to any industry. It's very applicable to the real estate industry. And so whenever you have something that you might perceive as a failure, I didn't get the listing, or I couldn't get this sold, or, it's an incredible opportunity for you to go back and reanalyze and see what you could have done differently, what could have worked. And the experience is really, you learn more through the things that don't go right. So I thought that was, a really interesting component. And then we took a drive to an area that we really didn't know much about, but that Avanti Way Capital and the Avanti Way team is developing this new project in an area called Lake Worth Beach, which, we'd
heard of Lake Worth.
Right. We'd heard, I never, I really didn't hear of Lake Worth Beach. And it was interesting. The development is called DecoGreen. It's a rental community. They're developing 127 rental residential units. It's about 116,000 square feet of space for rent. There is an office component of 1,900 square feet and 6,800 square feet of retail. I also like the fact that they have almost 20,000 square feet of like a public area.
Right.
And I think it's going to be very complementary to the area. There's already a new development there that we saw.
Directly across the street.
Directly, adjacent to it, right? The MD Apartments, I think it's called. So, and we were really pleasantly surprised with the area. It's an area in transition, right? The houses, they have a lot of cute homes and a lot of well-maintained. There was a little
historic district, very small homes, single-family homes with some Spanish-style, beachy style cottages. And it reminded me a lot of the Mimo district down here in Miami, where I didn't see any hotels. We didn't drive too far up or down, but the style and the feel was very much like the Mimo district when, before or around the time when Aberjane bought the Vagabond Motel. And now, that's changed. It's been slow in coming, but you have a lot of really unique shops and stores, and you could see where there was a ton of stuff for sale. Yeah. There were a lot of vacancies, so that's where you can see the change taking place. And a lot of the older buildings were being updated and painted and impact-resistant windows and everything else. So, very, very interesting area. And again, got to see another part of South Florida that don't know that is going to be fed heavily by the growth that's going on in Palm Beach, right? Yeah. Tons of growth in Palm Beach and West Palm Beach. And here's this little pocket that is already starting to see development.
I think it's a really interesting location. I think it has a lot of future, upside. It looks like there's a lot of opportunities. Now, this might not be applicable to this area. We were having a conversation about a client of yours who once told you that I invest in the border of scary. And right. I thought that was, what a cool line.
Not a client. She's a commercial agent in Texas, in Austin, Texas. And she's also an investor. And Delia Becker, otherwise known as Badass Bitch. And she's amazing. And I don't know if I can say that on a podcast, but it's our podcast.
Well, it is our podcast.
But she's amazing. And she says that, she invests in the border of scary. And for her, that's just means that she invests in an area that she's not quite comfortable in, right, because she knows it's changing and she feels a little bit scared about putting her money in, but then she sees a vision and sees what's coming. And she says, she's invested in safe before, I'm sure, but anyway, that's kind of what it is. And if I think about way back when, I remember a girlfriend and I fell in love with what is currently the Edgewater district. Yeah. And I remember trying to get investors to go there. And for those of you who don't know, the Edgewater district in Miami is right off of Biscayne Boulevard, and it fronts Biscayne Bay. We used to go down there. My stepmother got badly mugged down there and was actually put in the hospital. And my husband worked down there. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like so close to downtown. It's right on the water. They had beautiful old dilapidated but old Spanish buildings. And I was telling my girlfriend, we need to get investors in here and buy up these blocks. Everybody thought we were insane. And the reason everyone thought we were insane is because it was a scary area. There was nothing much going on. There was a lot of crime, nothing happening after dark, no place to shop, no place to walk. And I remember sending my husband by a property because we couldn't get a hold of the broker. And I said, I think we wrote the number down wrong. And he went by and he goes, I think you gave me the wrong address because there's no way that you'd be looking to buy down here. And I'm like, yeah, that's the house. He's like, no, it looks like a crack house. I'm like, that's the house. And then, of course, we got a lecture about what, my girlfriend and I were doing, driving around down there. But anyway.
Let me tell you something. FIU has a group called the Real Estate Alumni Affinity Council. And years ago, we did a tour with a couple of investors in Edgewater. And this is when Edgewater was getting a lot of attention. Every investor had discovered it. There was already a transition happening, right, because of Midtown, because of the design district, because of everything that was in its surrounding space. The big development that happened in Midtown, the Midtown shops there had already gone up. And I spoke to one of the investors who owned 3 buildings there. And he goes, yeah, it looks right now, it looks like, wow, I hit it big. It looks, I see the way you're seeing this investment, what a prime location, all that stuff. But I've been at this for 10 years and I've been through a lot of, rough patches. Right. It hasn't been easy to manage all that stuff, especially because they were multifamily. He says, maybe I came in too early. Right. But definitely has been the right investment. And I know that usually what investors are looking for is they're looking for the rewards to be commensurate with the risk. So they look for a very large cap rate to be commensurate with what they're going to have to deal with. I thought that was a really interesting, he kind of brought everybody into
back to reality. Right. And that's true. I mean, you could say the same thing about Tony Goldman when he was buying in Wynwood and the DecoGreen companies when they were buying in the Design Center. I mean, the Design Center is what it is today. But I remember in the 80s when again, they still had some of the design shops down there and they were trying to create it in the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. And I remember I had a customer who, she's a very well-known designer, Adriana Hoyos, and she's out of Ecuador and she was looking at putting something here. And I remember back then taking her there and she's like, yeah, no. And now she's there and she loves it, but it's taken them a long time. And to your point, that whole time, they might have bought really low, but I'm sure there was a lot of time where there was no income or very little income.
Well, just to give people perspective that don't know the story of the design district, but when DACRA begins to buy in the design district these office and retail stores, you could rent a retail store for $6 a square foot.
Right.
Now they're over $125 a square foot.
Right.
But, that's 20 years, and that's a purposeful investment in an area.
Kudos to them, because DACRA, the design center is one of my favorite spots in Miami because, first of all, very high-end retail. Again, not a shopper, but every single building is unique. And, Florida in general, when I first moved here from California, we developed so rapidly, basically, since air conditioning was invented, right? And we became, as far as I was concerned, we were one strip mall from Key West all the way up to Orlando. And now the cities are starting to transform. And as the cities are incorporating and breaking away from counties, they're becoming a little bit more intentional in their zoning and their development. But the design center was DACRA's vision. They had a vision for what it was going to become. They were extremely patient, extremely intentional. Yeah. And every single retail store down there is totally unique. Super, super cool. So,
and I think part of it is that, Craig Robbins, this is his vision. He is DACRA. And, the fact that he is an art collector and that he appreciates architecture. And, you could really look at that area and go like, talk about putting your thumbprint into, a few city blocks within the city of Miami and creating something that is, in your vision. And who would have really had that vision 25 years ago?
Right. Or the staying power. So let's get back to our road trip because we digressed, which is fine because
go to the best part.
I know that's why I want to get there.
I know. So we, earlier on, we're at the shopping center in Juno Beach. And our client tells us this story about a pizza place that is in a gas station right in the corner. And he's telling me we're trying to get him to see if he wants to come over this way because it's an incredible story. And he tells us this story that is, first of all, phenomenal pizza. But it was discovered because David Portnoy of Barstool Sports, he does this one bite pizza evaluation. I'm sure you guys have seen him or heard of him. He goes to this place and loves the pizza and gets behind the scenes and gets the story. And so this guy kind of blows up. And so Jennifer heard the best pizza, and she was like, okay, we got to get that pizza.
It's 11 a.m. and let me just fast forward. So it's 11 a.m. and one of the reasons for our road trip is because we were going to a pizza making class that night to raise money for RPAC, the Realtors. Yeah. So he's like, you're going to have pizza at 11 a.m. when we're going to a pizza making class? And I'm like, yeah. And so we go, and I'm all excited because all you see is this tiny little sign that says Willy's in black and white on the side and of the back of a shell, like where you would park to go into the convenience store. But then it says open at 1:00. Right. So we're like, okay, we're going to go and come back. So we went down to Fort Worth Beach, come back at 1:00, closed until 3. So we're like, okay, let's go. I can't remember. We went and did something else. But I just had pizza on the brain because now I'm obsessing and my mouth is watering and all I can think about is this pizza. Get back at 3. There's a line. Willy's behind the counter, totally ignoring everybody. Finally, he goes, people, I'm not opening until 3:30. And I'm like, okay, so let's go back. So we went back. That's what we did. We went back to the shops, got Fernando his coffee because we always have to check out every single coffee spot, and checked out 2J's to see how different, this great Jewish deli is from, how different it was. Very similar menu from the one in Coral Springs. And go back at, I think we got there at like 3:45, and now there's a bigger line, and he continues to ignore me, and I'm sitting there watching him make pizza, and he tells me to go sit down. Fernando's like, I'm just going to wait in the car, and I'm like, Fernando's going to be waiting in the car a long time. So this guy totally ignores me. I'm watching him make pizza. There's no menu. So I have no idea what toppings they have, but Fernando and I had already decided. We went back and forth between cheese and anchovies, and I'm like, come on, I have to get anchovies if I'm with somebody who likes anchovies. Since he tells me to wait, I'm talking to the people in line. They're like, oh, is this your first time? I said, well, it's my third time here today, but my first time trying to get a taste of this pizza. So they're all telling me how they've been fans. One of them has been a friend of his for like 12 years. So they're telling me the whole story. And finally he's like, lady, you're up. So I go up there. I tell him I want an anchovy pizza. And he's like, okay. And he's like, you need banana peppers on your pizza. I'm like, I'm not sure. My partner wants banana peppers. He's like, you have to. It's my favorite. And everyone in line's going, you have to get it, the anchovy. And I'm like, how many people here like anchovies? And they're all like, not our favorite, but this is good. So anyway, so I order it, but not for anything. It is the best pizza I've ever had in my life. Oh my God. And so I had never heard of Dave Portnoy until... Right. I guess about a couple months ago, one of the women in our investment group used to work for a pizza chain from New York, and they were expanding, and she's an amazing broker, and she was getting them great spaces and everything. And I guess David came down and did a review, and it wasn't a very good review. And so the owners freaked out, stopped expanding, fired the broker, not because of anything she had done wrong, but just, right. And then I'm like, who is this guy? That one review from this guy can not only cost somebody their job, which, I mean, that happens to brokers all the time, but can make a company totally change their... Yeah. So anyway, this was the second time I've heard of him, and I hadn't researched him or anything. But
well, look, what I love is, guys, this is not like a Wawa or like a Buc-ee's, okay? You got to understand, this is a small shell gas station like with about, there's like 6 pumps, I think, or maybe 4. Yeah, there might have been only 4 pumps. Small gas station. This guy is inside of the gas station behind a counter making pizza. He's been making pizza for over 45 years. Okay, he came down from New York. He's originally from Colombia, and he realizes, what does everybody say about New York pizza? It's great because of the water. So in his home, he builds this water treatment system, right? And make sure that he gets the water to be with the same, chemistry as the water in New York. And every day he brings that water from his home into this gas station to make, an incredible pizza. I want you to just Google David Portnoy, Willy's Pizza in Juno Beach, and you're going to get the entire story. And what I love is when David tells him, I know you don't know who I am, but I'm going to blow you up. You're going to have a lot. You're going to be busy. And his hands is like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's only me. I only got 2 hands. I don't know.
And it's funny because I was talking to the people that were in line that have known him for a while, and they're like, oh, yeah, he used to offer calzones and strombolis and all this other stuff, and now all he does is pizza. So I'm like, I obviously wanted to come see you, not because of Dave's review, but because our client across the street had said something. Yeah. And then, which was weird because that's a whole nother story. So then I run into the dad who we hadn't met before.
You hadn't met him before.
Yeah, I hadn't met him before. And so anyway, so I'm talking to him. I'm like, yeah, I came at 11. He's like, oh, I don't open at 11. I said, well, I came at 1. He goes, yeah, today I was really, really tired. So I slept. I was talking to his friends, and he doesn't hire anybody. It's his pizza. It's his way. He makes it with love. And it's funny, he's a Colombian, but he's really a New Yorker. Yeah. His attitude and everything, and it was hilarious. No, I loved the guy, and he was hilarious. He made me eat the pizza there. So poor Fernando's still in the car, and I'm chowing down on this pizza like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever had.
I will say this. It was, an amazing pizza, an incredible story, and anybody would love to have him in a shopping center, Yeah. And he probably will never move out of there, right? Because he wants to control the quality of the pizza. He wants to do it himself. He wants to do it his way. He doesn't want to have his store hours. He wants to do his hours. I knew we were in trouble when I saw, the opening time, and then the time was written in pencil, so he could erase it and go, no, now 3:30. We're there at 3:00. He goes, guys, it's going to be another half hour. It's just, we're just not ready.
And to your point, your customer wants him, and he was talking about him moving next door, that he owns a shopping center, and that's how I said, are you Alex's dad? But and then we got in a whole conversation. But so I was thinking, to your point, so imagine if he did open his own it could be small, right? Yeah. His own tiny little shop. And he doesn't do slices, by the way, so you have to buy the whole pie, which you're going to want to buy the whole pie anyway, maybe too. No doubt. But so he wouldn't have to schlep his water. I'm sure he could convince them to put in the water treatment system and all that. But then if he gets too big...
Well, I thought about the same thing. There's a couple of little places where he can have the water system. He doesn't have to do all that stuff, But I'm sure he's going to want to have in his lease that I'll open whenever I want. I'll close whenever I want,
Yeah, super. Yeah, that was super cool. That was definitely the highlight of the trip. And I know I'm going to be obsessing. And just so you know, every time we go to Orlando, I'm going to make you stop by there.
Yeah, I'm game. We're going to take an hour because we don't know if we're going to, we might get lucky, we might not get lucky. For those of you who are Seinfeld fans, you've heard about the soup Nazi. So he goes, they call me the pizza Nazi because, he'll tell people, no, that doesn't go like that. You gotta have it with these toppings.
You have to have,
and you gotta have my garlic sauce, and I make it with love every 2 days, and you gotta. What I found funny is, our last stop on the trip was at Double Roads. And it's this great, cool. Beautiful, great place, which is owned by a local operator. It is a great restaurant and bar, and has also a really funny pizza making. The chef was very affable. He was a great guy, and so we're there to do this fundraising for RPAC, the Realtor Political Action Committee. And what I found really interesting is, in this event is, they have a private area that had a speakeasy, but the space is really big, and I'm trying to place it, it kind of looks a little familiar, and it used to be an Outback, right? And then Outback leaves, and a local operator comes in and then creates a really great environment, and very supportive of local artists. So he's got a lot of musicians that come in every night. It looks like a very local crowd.
Emily Line, if you're ever in the area, you have to go. All vinyl records, and they sell them.
Yes, absolutely.
Super cool.
It was a really, really, really cool place. But what I love is, we're telling the story, and not everybody knows the story about Willy, and we're telling them, and everybody's giving us a hard time, like, you went to eat pizza when you're about to make pizza? And I was like, yeah. And I think it was Kim, a great agent in the Jupiter area, and she goes, the pizza Nazi?
Yeah, he's definitely a local favorite, and everybody knows him. And just to go back to Double Roads, because it's a cool story, and that's something that's so cool about up there. And I think as commercial practitioners, we have to be very, very careful when we're leasing space and a place becomes successful, because and I'm thinking of Lincoln Road versus like this area of Juno Beach. Right. What made Lincoln Road so cool way back in the day, and people would stroll it and everything else, was the fact that there were so many local, unique shops and artists and everything else. And all of a sudden, it just became a mega chain corridor, right? So it went from cool individual boutique shops and artists, art galleries, and local stores to Apple, The Gap, Zara, stuff that you can find anywhere. And the rent skyrocketed, so the locals left. And what gave that road character wasn't the fact that it was just an open, traffic-free, brick-lined walking mall. It was the fact that it had such cool, individual, unique stores. So I think that was, I think that's something that we need to look at. I do worry a little bit about Wynwood. I think they're doing a good job curating that, but it would be so sad if a lot of those local places, there are some chains, but if a lot of the local places, and again, Wynwood's an incubator, for a lot of our F&B, and if all of a sudden that was to leave, then it would lose that flair. And all of a sudden you're going to be at the highest rents and only the corporates can come in. That's like my little warning out there to all the retail, to retail owners and investors and brokers to please remember the characters, what built the space and what keeps it successful. And now Lincoln Road is having to reinvent itself once again.
Then we have come to the place that ends all of our episodes, and which is your stat of the day. So I am very concerned that you and I may have gotten the same stats. I have no idea. We never know each other. So we don't even talk about it. But I am deathly afraid that I'm going to let you go first, that you're probably going to have the same information I got.
I know it's so Fernando and I are, we're like work spouses, so we tend to think the same. We have a lot of not similar ideas, but all of a sudden something will pop up in our head. And for the first time, I think a couple of episodes, he literally had the exact same stats. I'm like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me! And the stats had nothing to do with what our episode was about. So that was really scary. Like I felt like he looked at me. So I'm going to talk about pizza stats.
I knew it.
I'm going to talk about pizza stats. So Americans consume about 3 billion pizzas each year. They prefer thin crust, 61%. That results in about 350 pizza slices per second. And in Florida, there are a total of 2,823 pizza restaurants. So they probably don't have Willy's in there because by any stretch of the imagination, that's not a restaurant. But as of July of this year, there are a total of 2,823 pizza restaurants in Florida.
You had me struggle now because I was going to give the exact same stats.
I don't believe you.
But thank you, Google. I'll show it to you, all right, for this. So to go further into the pizza stats, the state that loves pizza the most is Connecticut, where there are 3 pizza stores per capita. Okay, I can attest to, there's great pizza in Connecticut. I can attest to that. The state that dislikes pizza the most, Hawaii, where there's only one pizza store per capita. Oh, Hawaiian pizza is, a bastardization of pizza. I just said something. Those are fighting words. I know.
That's true. I lived in Hawaii and I never had a Hawaiian pizza. But going back to kava, I had never heard of kava. We looked at kava because we looked up what kava was. So I'm not going to do a spoiler alert here. You guys just have to Google kava if you don't know what it is. But supposedly it's a big drink in Hawaii, and I never had it or heard of it. Poi, poi bar maybe, but kava bar, no.
No, really interesting. It's an interesting concept that is making its way to your local shopping center. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us on this other episode.
Road trip.
This was like a little bit of a potpourri of different stops along the way, but we wanted to share it with you guys. And as always, thank you for pulling up a chair and listening.